Hey guys, it's Joe Raiti from Raiti's Rides, and I've been getting a lot of messages through email, people leaving comments. They wanted me to do a little how-to when it comes to a manual transmission car. As some of you are aware, I'm a teacher. I'm a high school teacher, so I work with teenagers every day, and that's like that big rite of passage. Getting your driver's license, getting your first car, and being able to drive on your own, having that freedom. And obviously, one thing that's really going away is learning how to drive a manual transmission car. I think if more people knew how to drive manual transmission cars, we wouldn't be facing this issue of, hey, save the manual, please, car companies, make some cars with manual transmissions. Now, if you go to other countries, especially countries in Europe, they primarily drive manual transmission cars. There's very little automatics that they have. So it's here in the United States where we have an issue where we, as Americans, don't like shifting our gears. I'm very proud to say, though, that I am one of many that still do. I wouldn't have it any other way. Over the years, I've driven tons of manual transmission cars, and even in the worst of traffic situations, I still prefer the manual. Having a manual transmission car is like being connected with the car in that extra way that you just can't appreciate with an automatic transmission. Now, let me preface before I start, I am no expert. Like I said, I drive a manual transmission car. I race cars professionally for 2 years. That's where I've gotten all my experience. But I wanted to put this together for people who don't know how to drive a manual transmission car, who want to maybe quick little step-by-step, just to give them a little bit more information so that they could become confident and be able to operate a car that is a manual transmission car. Now, I'm going to try to break it down into the steps. I'm going to explain it the best that I can. Obviously, if you have any questions after the video's over, leave a comment. I'll be more than happy to answer your question and film more if you need more. Some of the advantages of driving a manual transmission car is, number one, in today's day and age, in the 21st century, it's a great theft deterrent. A lot of car thieves don't know how to drive manual. So if they try to steal yours, they're not going to get anywhere because they don't know what to do. So right off the bat, that's a great reason to have a manual transmission car. Number two, I'm not a big fan of texting while driving, and if you're using both hands, one on the steering wheel, one on your manual transmission, it makes it harder to text and drive. Number three, I really think it makes you more aware of what's going on around you. You have to pay a little bit more attention to the task at hand, driving your car. Number four, hopefully, if you have a manual transmission car, hopefully, it's something that you enjoy driving, because the manual transmission car is just going to make the driving experience that much more because you are part of the car. The car is an extension of you. So here are some right off the bats do not do's if you are driving a manual transmission car. I think one of the biggest ones that I remember my dad telling me is don't rest your hand on the shifter. When the shifter is in gear and the car's in gear, I don't care if it's in first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever, do not rest your hand on the gear shift lever, because what happens is there are synchros in the upper portion of the gearbox. The synchros allow the shifter to go from one gear to another easier. What happens is a lot of times these synchros are made out of plastic or other soft metals, and what can happen is you could actually produce wear on those synchros, and then what could happen is you'll actually have issues when it comes to shifting the car, and you'll grind, and it'll be harder for you to go from first to second, second to third, so on and so forth. So do not rest your hand on the shifter. Another thing that happens to not deal with the shifter or the clutch or anything is your emergency brake. Inside your emergency brake lever, you have a plastic gear. What that gear does is when you pull up on the emergency brake, you're going to hear that click sound. what you could do to help prevent wear on that plastic gear in there that is engaging as you're pulling back on the emergency brake lever. Something that I've trained myself to do is just push in the release button, pull it up, and then release the button. And it'll lock into place, and you don't have to worry about wearing out that gear inside from the click as you're pulling it up. Another huge thing, while driving the car, do not rest your foot on the clutch pedal. Your foot needs to be on a dead pedal. If your car has a dead pedal, all it is usually a plastic urethane block to the left-hand side of the clutch that allows you a place to firmly rest your foot. If there's no dead pedal there, then you're going to have to just place it on the carpet, on the floorboard. Do not even gently rest it on the clutch. You could actually apply pressure while you're driving without knowing it. And what's going to happen is you can have extra clutch wear. When you're learning to drive a manual transmission car, make sure you had something to eat. Make sure you're well rested, because what happens is that we have this frontal portion of our brain called the frontal lobe. That's all our logic, our thinking, our judgment. When that shuts down due to being hungry or frustrated, you might as well give up for the day, because if you're trying to force this whole thing to happen, it's not going to work. You got to be calm, be patient, expect to stall the car. If your goal is to learn this whole thing and not stall the car at all, that is wishful thinking. Already having your mindset that you are going to stall the car, it's going to be a little herky-jerky, but don't worry. With practice, it will smooth out. I promise you. I've been there. You'll be there. You will eventually get through it. I promise you. So, one thing that I like to tell people when they're learning to drive a manual transmission car is just press on the clutch. Get a feel for what the clutch tension is like. Just move the gear shift lever. Try to find out where those gears are. Every single manual transmission car is going to have different spacing between the gears. So find out where your first is, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Some cars even have 7-speed manual transmissions, like a new Corvette, for example. We're obviously inside my Ford Focus RS, and this car comes equipped only with a manual. So what's nice is by learning to drive a manual transmission car, you're joining a special club, and there's special models that only you'll be able to drive and buy. Other people who don't know how to drive a manual are going to be out to lunch. So just get a feel for it. This Ford Focus RS has a 6-speed manual transmission. The gear shift throws are very short, and they're very close together. The gear gates are very close together. It's got a nice feel to it. With a sportier car, you're going to get that better feel. So if you're driving something like maybe a Toyota Corolla with a manual, if you could even get that car in a manual, it might not be as slick shifting as the transmission in this car, or definitely a car like a Corvette or Porsche or something like that. Another thing is familiarize yourself with how you get in reverse. Every single manual transmission can be totally different where reverse is. On this car, it's all the way up and to the left. Now, how you get there is you pull up on the reverse cutout ring here, and then that's going to allow you to put it into reverse. Other cars, it might be down and to the right. Some you push down on the top of the stick shift to engage that reverse lockout so you could get over to reverse. Each car is different, so just know for your particular make and model where reverse is on your car. You don't have to worry about accidentally going into reverse. You're not going to be shifting this car like this and hitting that ring there and potentially putting it into reverse. You're not going to do that. That would be just bizarre for you to shift with your hand like this. Now, when it comes to the shifter, you want to be gentle. You should not be squeezing the shifter with all your might and like Fast and the Furious going through the gears of your car. That's not what it's about. When I was in racing school, what they tell you is a nice, soft touch. All you're doing is guiding the transmission from one gear to the next and to the next. You're not using any force. The more force you use, the greater a chance you have of putting wear on those synchros and actually missing a gear. So when you're shifting. So my advice is keep it nice, soft, and gentle. I like to just use the palm of my hand. And if you have a nice size shift knob like the one I put on my Ford Focus RS, you could just have it rest right in that palm of your hand and it'll be just like butter. Real nice and easy. So you should not be manhandling your shifter. Second of all, and probably one of the biggest things, is the clutch pedal. I'm hoping that I don't need to explain what are the arrangement of the pedals. If I do, we might want to second think this whole manual transmission thing. Obviously, gas pedals on the right, brakes in the middle, clutch pedals on the left. Every single car is going to have what's called a pickup point, where the clutch engages. So anytime you get into a new car to drive, even after you've learned how to drive a manual transmission car, you want to slowly release that clutch while you're pressing in the gas to know where the pickup point is. On this Ford Focus RS, it's much lower than on my old Honda Civic Type R. So just get a feel. Obviously, you also want to get a feel for the force of what you have to apply to the clutch lever. With the clutch pedal, a V8 car, like say a Mustang or a Camaro, will probably require more force than say a car that just has a 4-cylinder, or like this car, a 4-cylinder turbo. So these are things to be aware of. Once you feel comfortable, like you've played around with it, obviously whenever you're shifting, you want to press in the clutch, even when the car is off. Know what neutral feels like, shake it back and forth a little bit when you're in neutral, just so you know what it feels like. Because when you're driving a manual transmission car, it's all about feel. Now in the beginning, you're going to be watching everything like a hawk because you're going to be nervous about what you're doing. But just be aware that with time, you won't look at the tachometer to know what's the RPM of the engine. And if you don't know what RPM stands for, it stands for revolutions per minute. Second of all, you won't be looking at the gear shift lever saying what number gear I'm in. You'll know by the feel, by the position. So everything will eventually be by feel. And what's awesome is all of this that you're doing is going to be stored as muscle memory. In your brain, right back here, you have something called the cerebellum. The cerebellum is the place where muscle memory is stored. It's also called the little brain. Just a little tip if you're ever on Jeopardy or something like that. But that's where your muscle memory's stored. So what's awesome about learning a manual transmission car is if you say learn how to drive a manual transmission car and then 5 years later you haven't driven a manual transmission car, if you get back in a manual transmission car, you will be able to drive it. Now it may not be so smooth right off the bat, but you're not going to have to start from step one. So that's the great thing about this. It's like riding a bike. Once you learn it, you'll store it in that cerebellum and you'll be able to retrieve it where it'll be just another natural thing, just like walking down the street or feeding yourself. These are things that are also muscle memory that you learned along the way. The key to not stalling is this. If your left foot is down on the clutch and you have the car in first gear and you're about to take off, if your left foot is coming off that clutch, your right foot needs, not has to, it needs to press down on that gas pedal slowly. And it's a slow process. You're not stomping back and forth. It's a slow release and a slow pressure of pressing on that gas. So as you're coming off the clutch, gas pedal goes down. That's going to prevent you from stalling. If you release the clutch too soon and you have not pressed down on the gas, that's when you're going to stall. So remember, left foot raises up, right foot has to go down. If it's not, you're going to stall unless you're in neutral, obviously, which if you're trying to go, you're not going to be in neutral. Once you get going, then it's a piece of cake. So besides the takeoff, the second hardest thing is when you have a hill. Now, thankfully in Florida, a lot of it's flat, but we do have some speed bumps that we got to get over. In other parts of this country, you're going to have some pretty big hills. Now, if you have a newer car, you might want to check your owner's manual. Yes, that's the book that you were given when you bought the car that nobody ever looks at. A lot of new cars, including my Ford Focus RS, has what's called hill assist. Hill assist is for when you say you come to a stop sign on a hill and you have the car in first gear and the clutch is down. When you go to release the brake and get going, the car will actually hold on to the brakes a little just to give you that time to start going so you don't roll backwards. My advice is this: if your car does have hill assist and you are learning to drive a manual transmission for the first time, I would shut it off. Because think about it. If you learn how to drive a manual with hill assist, if you get in a car without it, it might freak you out. You might be used to the hill assist, and then once you start rolling, you panic, and you're just screwed. So my advice is shut off the hill assist. Pretend you don't have it while you're learning. It's sort of like in math class, when you were a kid, you had to show by hand that you could do the math. Then you could use a calculator. You don't start off with the calculator first. It's sort of like that. So make sure you look. It's called hill assist, and usually there's a way to deactivate it. Every car is different. You're going to have to look in the owner's manual. So now you're ready. You're ready to attempt this thing of driving a manual transmission car. Hopefully you had something to eat. Hopefully you feel good. You're not frustrated. You're not hot. You're not angry. You're nice and calm, because that's the key. If you're calm, you're going to pick this thing up so quickly. If you're freaking out and you're nervous, it's probably going to be a train wreck. And that's okay, because try and try again. Practice makes perfect. So first thing you got to do is not start up the car. Put on your seatbelt. I don't care if you're in a parking lot. I don't care if you're in your neighborhood. I don't care if you're in your garage. Put on the seatbelt. That is always, always, always step one. The next step is push in the clutch and make sure the car is in neutral. Okay? I like to always start my car off in neutral. I don't care where I'm going. I don't care what I'm doing. That's just something that I like to do. So go ahead, press the clutch in, start up the car. Car is in neutral. Now you can release your foot off the clutch. Another piece of advice when it comes to the clutch. People always ask me, should I be downshifting every time I come to a stop? Now, that's one of the great things about a manual transmission car. You could use the manual transmission to slow you down. I tend to do what feels right at the time. More often than not, I just put the car in neutral and use the brake to slow down. And the reason why I do that is because I'm a firm believer that it's cheaper to change out some brake pads than it is to replace a clutch. So it's up to you. If you are downshifting to slow the car down, you need to be careful. You need to make sure that you're not skipping gears, because what can happen is if you don't rev match, which I'm not even going to get into heel toe rev matching right now because this is just for beginners, the basics. If you are in 6th gear, let's say, and you're doing 55 miles an hour, and you put it into first and then let out that clutch, the speed of the gears in the transmission and the speed of the engine are not in sync. What's going to happen is you're going to lock up the wheels and you could have an accident. So my advice is either A, just push in the clutch, hit the brake, slow down the car by pressing on the brake and come to a stop that way, or you could push in the clutch and put it in neutral and slow down the car, or you can downshift one at a time is what I would recommend. That is probably another thing that people always ask me. So now you're ready. You're going to go ahead, you're going to press down the clutch, you're going to put the car into first gear, and then, like I said, left foot comes off, right foot comes down, and it's a piece of cake once you get it. So here we go. Real easy. Left foot, remember, take off your emergency brake. Shooting this video and there I made a mistake. So that's another problem that can happen is emergency brake could be on. Make sure emergency brake is off. All you do is hit that release button and just lower it down. So here we go. Car's in first, Clutch is down. I'm now gonna apply some gas and let off the clutch. And there we go. Now we're moving. And it's a piece of cake. The rest of it is just simply driving and shifting. That's all. You press in second gear and you go. You really don't want to let the car bog down. You want to make sure that you're not herky-jerky in it. You want to keep it smooth. As you get more and more practice, you will do better and better and better. And I promise you, before you know it, you'll have this thing down pat. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Whenever you're stopping the car and shutting it off, I would leave the car in gear and always, always, always remember to pull up on the emergency brake. If you don't, what could happen is that if it's not in gear, it's going to be in neutral and the car's going to roll if there's any sort of incline. If you do have it in gear, but you don't use the emergency brake, the car could pop out of gear and it could roll. Or if you just use the emergency brake, sometimes emergency brakes fail or they wear just like any other type of brake on your car, brake pad, and your car could roll. So you want to use both always. I don't care if it's in your garage, parking lot, whatever. So that's basically, like I said, in a nutshell. If you have any other questions or comments, definitely leave them down in that comment section. If you have not hit subscribe yet, hit that subscribe button. I promise you, you'll be wanting to come back to see what vlogs I'm doing next or what car I'm reviewing. And if you have been watching and subscribing, thank you guys. I'm very grateful for all of it. And if you have something you want to see featured on Raity's Rides, visit my website, raitysrides.com. You could go to my Instagram, Raity's Rides, or like I said, leave a comment here on my channel. And just like always, guys, I'll see you on the next ride.